When Smash 4 was released for the 3DS and Wii U, a universal mechanic introduced alongside it was Rage, wherein characters gain increased kill power on their moves as they themselves get progressively injured. First iterations of this mechanic were noticeable to say the least, to the point where a max Rage character would be significantly more threatening to go up against than that very same character at zero. This was intended to encourage players to close out stocks quickly so as not to incur the potential negative consequences of leaving their opponent at a high percent for too long, while simultaneously rewarding players who could stay at such a vulnerable percent for long stretches of time. Prior to Rage though, a character was released in Smash Brawl with an almost identical property attached to himself, Lucario, and his unique ability, Aura. In a similar fashion to Rage, the more damage Lucario sustained, the stronger his attacks would become, only in addition to increasing knockback, the damage of his attacks would also be substantially magnified. From then on, Lucario has developed a reputation for being very, and I emphasize very frustrating, not just to fight but also to play. While he's actually had rather commendable placements in Brawl and Smash 4, in Ultimate he's seen his worst position yet, with many players deeming him a low-tier character. Naturally, he's one of the least popular fighters in competitive, with only I think Armadillo and Gachipi to name a few sticking with him. So for today's episode of Why No One Plays, we'll be discussing Lucario. Previously emphasized in other episodes in this series, a cornerstone trait for any successful and popular character in tournament play is consistency. It doesn't matter how high your peaks are if your valleys are equally reflective. I should clarify, consistency doesn't necessarily imply a fighter has no weaknesses. Some of the most widely played cast members have noticeable flaws that can be and are frequently exploited, but what enables them to still garner mainstream attention is whether they have the tools necessary to overcome that weakness. Next to consistency, agency is an equally essential linchpin for a character's success. If success or failure depends completely on the player's own ability, and if the character is able to offer a worthwhile return on investment in relation to the effort put in. Therefore, it stands to reason having mechanics that are fully out of one's capacity to manipulate, yet still have consequential influence on the outcome of a fight would be more detrimental than supportive to one's tournament career. None more so than Lucario's Aura. Power spikes are abundant within Smash Ultimate, from Joker's Arsene to Cloud's Limit to Sephiroth's One Wing to Terry's Go Button to Cassia's Rage Drive to Little Mac's KO Punch. A measurable portion of the roster has fighters who can temporarily increase their combat pressure, and while said power spikes are indeed significant enough to make opponents adjust their game plans to account for it, the characters in question are still within appropriate limits. True, Terry's super specials can rip your stock to pieces, but it's not like he wasn't a force to be reckoned with beforehand. The one exception to this would be Lucario. Power spikes generally superimpose additional power and or privileges to a character onto their base form, as in if they were at 100% they would go up to 120 or 130. Lucario's Aura, however, is intrinsically active all throughout a fight from start to finish, serving as a multiplier of sorts. Unfortunately, said multiplier begins at a negative amount. At 0%, all of Lucario's damage and moves deal only 2/3 as much of the pressure as they're supposed to, meaning Lucario is actually weaker at low percent. In Ultimate, this multiplier evens out at 65, granting his normal attack parameters at that percent. From then on, his damage and kill power dramatically increased, capping out at 167 times upon reaching 190. Bear in mind, this is factored alongside Rage as well. In other words, all of Lucario's attacks can fluctuate between doing barely any damage and knockback and literally one-shotting you depending on which move you get struck by. Taking a look at this table, you'll notice that Smash Ultimate's ranges are surprisingly the most generous of the three installments, since if you remember, 1v1s tack on 20% more damage to attacks. More notably, Lucario's equilibrium point is the lowest in Ultimate at 65% compared to Brawl's 75%. And while the upper multiplier is a tad bit lower than Smash 4, the difference is fairly negligible. Yet despite this, Lucario's performance in Ultimate is worse than either of the previous titles, so what gives? Half of the cause is circumstantial while the other half is innately tied to his design, more specifically balance. To start, Lucario is the only character in Smash who begins a stock weaker than he's supposed to be due to his aura mechanic worsening his attacks. For some of you, that might seem like a blessing in disguise, since lower knockback means more combo potential. The problem is Lucario's attacks are balanced around neutral aura, not negative aura, making his early percent combo game extremely lackluster. Take forward air for instance, it has 3 damage percentages denoting the 3 aura benchmarks. 6% is fairly reasonable for an attack of that nature, but that's assuming you're at neutral aura. At negative aura, it does only 4%, making him no stronger than Sheik. This extends to all of his moves, from grounded normals to aerials to specials. Lucario is pretty much a bottom 5 character at low percents. Getting struck by even a fully charged Aura Sphere or forward smash will barely deal any damage or send you anywhere at all, not unless you're down 3 stocks to 1. Essentially, for Lucario to so much as be a functional character, he has to reach the benchmark of 65%, and even then you can make an argument he's still below average. I bet most people would agree that Lucario doesn't really start ramping up until 80 to 90% as Rage begins to compound on top of Aura. Most comeback mechanics are also around this point. Kazuya and Terry need to reach 100% for their respective mechanics. Joker and Little Mac get theirs around 60 to 70, while Sephiroth requires One Wing at 80% assuming even stocks. There's just one key difference though. All of the aforementioned comeback fighters are still full-fledged characters who can exert meaningful pressure even before they reach that point. Whereas for Lucario, that mid-percent range is when he reaches his base form quote-unquote. The expected trade-off is that Lucario's power spike can potentially be magnitudes more impactful than any of the other comeback mechanics. In terms of sheer power, there is a grain of truth to that. By 120% plus, Lucario's moves go from being minor nuisances to life-threatening attacks, especially when you factor in how much they augment his specials. On top of dealing more damage and knockback, Aura Sphere grows bigger, therefore covering more space to the point where a fully charged Aura Sphere can effortlessly hit below the ledge, something other charge shots cannot or struggle to do so. The Aftershock on Force Palm gains considerable range, making it safer to use even if you miss a grab. And finally, Extreme Speed gains more distance coverage and speed. Most importantly, with the increased damage and knockback, all of his moves get safer on shield, both due to shield stun and shield pushback, demonstrated most famously by his neutraler being 0 on shield. His issue of having a slow start was present in Smash 4 and Brawl, but what makes it more pronounced here is the way Ultimate is turned out. While nowhere near as speedy as Melee, Ultimate certainly has a faster tempo than its predecessors. By that I mean in terms of how easy it is to explode. Sure, you had no shortage of cheese in Smash 4, but overall the game pace was a lot slower, hence why competitive was played in a 2-stock format. This enabled Lucario to play a more slow and steady match and get more mileage out of Aura, since it would be easier for him to exert pressure even when he was at risk of dying to a strong hit, not to mention Rage being stronger in Smash 4, making it so he would be more threatening at earlier percents. Smash Ultimate's advantage-oriented gameplay makes it so more often than not, Lucario cannot afford to lose too many neutral interactions despite his Aura mechanic necessitating it. He wants to get to high percent, but empirically, many characters have setups and conversions that skip the high percent altogether and start killing you from 80, where I'll remind you that's Lucario's base strength. 80 is kill percent for a lot of characters. At the ledge, Roy Jab back air kills at 80, Ken Shoryuken kills at 80, Violet Tipper back air can probably kill at 80, Pyro Dare into up smash kills at 80, Terry Jab Jab Buster Wolf easily kills you at 80, Fox near up smash might kill at 80 depending on your percent, and I'm pretty sure Snake up tilt starts killing Lucario around 90. Don't quote me on that. Point being, a non-negligible portion of the roster has kill setups that erase your stock well before you even have a chance to capitalize on Aura's destructive capabilities at high percents. It gets even worse when you're fighting touch of death characters like Luigi, Wario, and Kazuya. You can't afford to get struck by them even once. At the same time, if you're at 0%, you can't do any meaningful damage to them. Low and mid-level players might not be as efficient at killing you quickly, but high and top-level players most certainly are, further narrowing his margin for error. The need for him to be in high percent was somewhat alleviated by his respectable weight at 199 units in Brawl and 4 respectively. Ultimate lowered him to 93, still putting him in the mid-weight category, but that makes it further unlikely for him to be able to survive anywhere close to 150+%. Altogether, Lucario is always burdened by negative aura throughout a match, yet seldom reaps the benefits of positive aura, owing to his inconsistency. It also counterintuitively punishes Lucario for being ahead, putting the player in a very uncomfortable position where he's at his best when considerably behind. So you have to effectively play the entire game as if the next mistake you make will be your last. Meanwhile, if you're outplaying your opponent and are up 3 stocks to 1, Lucario's aura mechanic ironically makes him susceptible to being reversed on. There's no other comeback mechanic that becomes less effective when further ahead. It might appear later on, such as Sephiroth, but can you imagine Joker's Arsene attacks or Terry's super moves dealing less damage and knockback if they're up 3 stocks to 1? That would ruin the character. Yet that's Lucario in a nutshell. Another point that works against his gameplay is that Lucario's entire moveset is affected by aura, for better or worse, resulting in major fluctuations on what he can and can't do at any point in time. Certain combo strings are only doable at specific aura thresholds, of which, like I said, those thresholds fluctuate even further depending on stock disparity. Being a combo character, the last thing you want is variance. Having consistent combo windows gives you a clear game plan on what to look for at what time. More damage and knockback or conversely less damage and knockback might make certain combos unfeasible to pull off. You may recall Inkling's massive Booyah chart, which takes into account the matchup, how much rage you have, how much ink your opponent has, and all that stuff, making Inkling's rather average kill confirm hyper-specific. Compare this to Kazuya's electric combos, which have generous percent windows and can work on every single member of the cast with or without rage. All of Lucario's moves are affected by aura, including his combo starters, the one thing you don't want to be affected by aura. You might run into percent windows where stuff like up tilt and up air can close out of stock, but you might not have enough aura or maybe even too much aura. To his credit, the bigger aura sphere becomes, the more easily it can be used for neutrally charge into kill confirms like back air and up smash, but the bottom line is that he doesn't have assured windows and setups. Having increased damage output is more abusable on a character who relies on mid to long range pressure, as they can set up a wall or force enemies to approach them. Though he does have a charge shot projectile, Lucario still has to engage his opponent at some point, which isn't preferable given you want to preserve max aura as much as you can. If, say, Lucina or Shulk had aura, they can take better advantage of it since they can play very defensively, as both have strong mid-range pressure and ways to threaten reckless engage, such as an up B at a shield. Imagine Lucina and Shulk with max aura, max rage, holding shield. Dolphin or Air Slash will kill you at like 60. The reason Lucario can't play a very wall-heavy game is twofold. For one, he's floaty. He can't just short-hop fastball spam the way Roy or Fox can. If he jumps, he has to commit to it. 2. Lucario doesn't have the right moves for that. While aerials do get safer on shield at higher auras, they're still pretty unsafe, and the only aerials that actually take advantage of the higher damage and knockback are back air, up air, and down air. Neutral and forward air, even at max aura, aren't really things to worry about in terms of kill power. While Lucario's back air is often equated to an aerial smash attack, it's pretty slow, has a small hitbox contrary to its animation, and is -7 on shield even at max aura, auto-shieldable by many opponents. Up and down air both have very specific hitboxes, so he can't really threaten large spaces outside of Aura Sphere. Despite being a combo character, he also doesn't have the most impressive frame data. He's not fast enough in either speed or rate of attack to be a rushdown, nor is he evasive enough to qualify as a hidden runner. Don't misunderstand, Lucario has some of the best airspeed in the game. That man can fly from coast to coast with one jump, and you can weaponize that with his generous B reverse momentum, but he's not as fast paced as the likes of Zeosuit or Greninja. Final issue is that Lucario doesn't acquire any new properties from aura, merely more damage and kill power, which is helpful mind you, but the real virtue of comeback mechanics is that they give you more options. For instance, Sephiroth's One Wing gives him an extra jump and super armor on smash attacks. The latter isn't that valuable, but an extra jump can open up the door for many things. Cloud's Limit Break grants him a transcendent long-range projectile that can kill, drastically better recovery that also becomes an out-of-shield kill option, and the ability to stall himself in the air while threatening large amounts of space in front of him. Not to mention 3 of his 4 limit moves grant intangibility on startup. Kazuya gets a Super Mega Ultra Death Command Grab with Super Armor. Little Mac gains a 1-hit kill option that can pierce through shields. Joker gains a counter and reflector, plus many of his attacks acquire additional hitboxes for better coverage. Terry gains a huge anti-air and ledge trapping tool, plus a long-distance burst movement option. Lucario's specials do get enhanced, but he retains most if not all of his weaknesses he had before, no matter how much aura he gets. Sure, his opponent now has to worry about mistakes being more punishing, but the game plan doesn't really change. If he's getting his ass beaten at 0%, he will continue to get his ass beaten at 150. Basically, you have nothing to bail you out of a bad situation, even though the character requires you to be in a bad situation to tap into his full strength. It's not about how much power you have, but whether or not it's easy to reach and then apply that power. Lucario doesn't really have a safe and consistent way to reach max aura, and then a way to reliably exert it. If he had a Nubby at a shield, a standard kill throw, or if he had a strong grounded burst option like Wolf F-Tilt, he would be way more threatening. But with his floaty physics, short attack range, and relatively slow frame data on his normals for moves of that type, he can't create situations that give him favorable risk to reward, which is ultimately the main problem with Lucario and why he doesn't get played much. People call him a high-risk, high-reward character, but high-risk, high-reward assumes your access to that reward matches your exposure to that risk. For Lucario, this could not be further from the truth. You are always exposed to that risk, but you're not always promised that reward. I will say though, while Smash's growing push to 0 to death and one-shotting is making it hard for Lucario to survive long enough to make use of aura, it also somewhat works in his favor in the sense that if he does make it, he can do the exact same thing to them. I've been a big follower of Armadillo since 2022, and he's developed his understanding of Lucario's various limits and extents as evident by his commendable placements at recent majors, so the character is by no means unviable. It's just that it takes a superhuman effort to overcome that learning curve. Understandable why few if any want to take it when there are other characters who give more return for less investment. What do you guys think about Lucario? Do you think he's underrated, or is he really as bad as people claim? You're welcome to share in the comments. That's going to be it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be very much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.